This is my news of today with Remi Jurmain Djalis. On January 26, 2026, a former police constable in Jamaica has been found guilty in connection with the murder of a social media influencer. Following a verdict delivered by a 7-member jury in the Home Circuit Court, the guilty verdict was returned on Thursday, January 22, 2026. The jury found the former officer guilty of murder and of preventing the lawful burial of a corpse. He has been remanded in custody until his sentencing hearing. The victim was identified as a 24-year-old social media influencer and entrepreneur. Her mother reacted to the verdict with an emotional celebration, marking the end of a long and painful legal process. According to court proceedings, the jury deliberated for more than 3 hours before reaching its decision. Sentencing has been scheduled for March 13, 2026. During the trial, jurors heard that the victim was last seen in July of the year 2022 at the apartment of the accused in the parish of St. Andrew. After that day, she was never seen again, and her body has never been recovered. Police launched an investigation into her disappearance and later discovered bloodstains inside the apartment, including on a couch. The former constable was subsequently detained and maintained his innocence, claiming he loved his girlfriend and would never harm her. The prosecution presented circumstantial evidence during the trial, including phone records and additional material, which the jury found sufficient to establish guilt beyond reasonable doubt. The verdict prompted an emotional response from the victim's mother, who thanked the Jamaican public and law enforcement authorities for their support. She expressed gratitude for what she described as justice for her daughter, and said she would continue to seek accountability through the sentencing phase. This report is based on coverage originally published by a Caribbean regional news outlet. My next news is, the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries of Trinidad and Tobago held a virtual meeting with the United Kingdom representative to discuss recent UK policy announcements regarding fossil fuel projects abroad. The discussion focused on the UK government's plan, announced in December of 2020 at the Climate Change Summit, to end direct taxpayer support for fossil fuel initiatives outside the United Kingdom. During the meeting, the UK official clarified that the policy changes would not affect the operations of UK energy companies currently working in Trinidad and Tobago, including Shell and BP. These contracts involve foreign investment and are not linked to taxpayer support in the United Kingdom. The Trinidad and Tobago minister welcomed this clarification and highlighted the long-standing cooperation between the two countries as members of the Commonwealth. The conversation also emphasized the role of UK energy firms, including Lightsource, BP and Shell, in developing renewable energy projects in Trinidad and Tobago. A major solar project is scheduled to begin construction in 2021, with an expected completion time of approximately 18 months. This project will be the largest of its kind in the region and is part of the country's plan to achieve 10% renewable energy in the national electricity mix. The minister also discussed Trinidad and Tobago's commitments under the Paris Agreement, including reducing carbon emissions from industry, transport, and power generation by 15% by 2030. In the transport sector, the country is implementing compressed natural gas fuel in a phased manner. In electricity generation, Trinidad and Tobago is among 6 countries worldwide where 100% of electricity is currently produced from natural gas. The minister noted that the growth of renewable energy in electricity generation could gradually reduce domestic natural gas use, allowing the country to export more energy and earn foreign exchange, while supporting its climate goals. This report is based on coverage originally published by a Caribbean regional news outlet. My next news is, the United States President said on Monday that the Department of Justice and Congress are looking into Representative Omar of Minnesota. The remark was made during a morning post on the social media platform Truth Social. According to the president, the federal government is investigating what he described as large-scale fraud in the state of Minnesota. He claimed that this alleged fraud is partly responsible for violent and organized protests taking place in the streets. As part of this response, the White House border coordinator was sent to Minnesota that same evening. In the same message, the president stated that the Department of Justice and Congress are also reviewing the actions of Representative Omar. He claimed that she left Somalia with nothing and is now reportedly worth more than $44 million. No evidence or further details were provided to support these claims. When asked for a response, the Congresswoman's office referred journalists to a statement she shared on social media. In that message, she accused the president of spreading lies and conspiracy theories, stating that years of investigations have found no wrongdoing. She argued that the accusations are an attempt to distract from policy failures, and said federal officials should leave Minnesota. The Department of Justice did not immediately comment on the president's claims. News organizations also contacted congressional leadership from both parties, but no public responses were issued at the time. The president has repeatedly criticized Representative Omar in recent weeks, as well as the broader Somali American community. These attacks come amid growing criticism of the administration's immigration enforcement actions in the Minneapolis area. The president and his allies have focused attention on fraud allegations involving daycare centers operated by members of the Somali community. Following a fatal shooting in Minneapolis on Saturday, the president again referenced the Congresswoman. In another social media post, he questioned why she would have tens of millions of dollars, and claimed that vast sums of money had been stolen from Minnesota. He stated that federal immigration authorities were in the state investigating what he called massive financial fraud, missing billions of dollars, and illegal immigration tied to Democratic border policies. Representative Omar has strongly disputed these claims. In a video posted online in September, she said earlier accusations placed her net worth at more than $80 million, while newer claims lowered that figure to over $30 million. She explained that these figures misunderstand financial disclosures related to businesses in which her husband is a partial partner, not the sole owner. She pointed to her legally required financial disclosure filing for the year 2024. That report listed one company valued between $5 million and $25 million, categorized as partnership income, with no personal income attributed to her. Another company was listed with a value between $1 million and $5 million. Her personal income for the year was reported as between $5,000 and $15,000. The administration has faced widespread criticism over its handling of Minnesota-related matters, including the fatal shootings of 2 residents in recent weeks. Representative Omar is not the only Minnesota Democrat facing federal scrutiny. News reports last week revealed that the Department of Justice issued subpoenas to the state governor, the mayor of Minneapolis, and other officials. The investigation concerns allegations that state leaders interfered with federal immigration operations. Those officials have denied any wrongdoing, calling the probe politically motivated and an attempt to intimidate local leadership. The Minnesota investigations are part of a broader pattern involving inquiries into several political opponents of the president, most of whom are members of the Democratic Party. This report is based on an article originally published by a major United States news outlet. My next news is, the European Union and India have finalized a major free trade agreement after nearly 2 decades of negotiations. The deal is being described as a landmark moment that strengthens economic ties between both sides, partly driven by the impact of aggressive tariff policies introduced by the United States administration. The president of the European Commission announced the agreement in a social media post on Tuesday, calling it the mother of all deals. She stated that the agreement creates a free trade zone representing around 2 billion people and emphasized that both parties are expected to benefit. The announcement was made during an official visit to New Delhi alongside the President of the European Council. India's Prime Minister praised the agreement, saying it will strengthen the country's manufacturing and services sectors while boosting investor confidence in what is currently Asia's 3rd largest economy. He described the deal as India's biggest and most historic free trade agreement to date, and said it will make it easier for farmers and small businesses to access European markets. The conclusion of the talks reflects shifting global economic alignments under the current United States president. The European Union is seeking to reduce its economic dependence on both the United States and China, despite previous disagreements with India over trade policy. India, meanwhile, is working to move away from a protectionist image and to offset the impact of a 50% tariff imposed by the United States, while also balancing its relationship with Russia. According to the European Commission, the deal is expected to double European Union goods exports to India by the year 2032. India has agreed to eliminate or reduce tariffs on more than 96% of European shipments. In return, the European Union will remove or lower tariffs on more than 99% of goods imported from India over a period of 7 years, according to India's Ministry of Commerce and Industry. The agreement is considered India's most ambitious trade pact so far. India will allow up to 250,000 European-made vehicles to enter the country at preferential duty rates, a quota more than 6 times larger than those included in other recent trade agreements. The deal is expected to give India a competitive advantage in exporting labor-intensive goods affected by United States tariffs, including clothing, gemstones, jewelry, and footwear. The European Union has also offered binding commitments related to student mobility and post-study visas, along with market access across 144 services sectors. India has excluded its politically sensitive dairy sector from the agreement. This report is based on coverage originally published by an international financial news organization. My next news is, a fatal shooting in Minneapolis has complicated Second Amendment politics for the current United States president, after prominent Republicans and gun rights advocates criticized the administration's initial response. The controversy centers on the death of Alex Pretty, the second person killed this month by a federal officer in Minneapolis. Early statements from the administration suggested that Pretty was responsible for his own death because he lawfully possessed a firearm. That characterization quickly drew backlash from conservative lawmakers and gun rights groups. While the shooting has not yet resulted in clear changes to national gun policy, several influential figures within the president's political coalition have called for a full investigation into the incident. At the same time, they have pointed out what they see as inconsistencies in Republican messaging on Second Amendment rights. These tensions emerge as the president reshuffles officials overseeing his aggressive immigration enforcement strategy. With a midterm election year approaching, some Republicans worry that continued controversy could deepen voter skepticism about the administration's broader immigration approach. On Monday, the White House press secretary attempted to reaffirm the president's reputation as a strong supporter of gun rights. She told reporters that the president fully supports the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding Americans. However, she added that carrying a weapon while being confronted by law enforcement increases the risk of force being used. That statement marked a shift from earlier messaging. It came on the same day the president sent the White House border coordinator to Minnesota, appearing to elevate him over other senior Homeland Security officials who had been overseeing operations in Minneapolis. In the hours following Pretty's death on Saturday, senior officials claimed that he intended to harm law enforcement and that he was aggressively displaying a weapon. One official questioned whether a peaceful protester would arrive with a gun rather than a sign. Another senior White House advisor went further, publicly labeling Pretty an assassin. Videos recorded by bystanders later contradicted those claims. The footage shows Pretty holding a cell phone and assisting a woman who had been pepper sprayed by a federal officer. Moments later, Pretty himself was sprayed and forced to the ground by several officers. No video released so far shows him removing his concealed firearm, which he was legally permitted to carry in Minnesota. One officer appears to have taken possession of the weapon just before shots were fired. As the video spread widely online and on television, the vice president shared one of the early accusations on social media. The president later posted what he described as a photo of the gun involved, claiming it was loaded and accompanied by additional magazines. The reaction from gun rights advocates was swift. A major national gun organization initially blamed Minnesota Democrats for encouraging protests, but it pushed back strongly after a federal prosecutor suggested online that approaching law enforcement while armed could legally justify being shot. The organization called that reasoning dangerous and incorrect. The director of the Federal Investigative Agency added to the controversy during a Sunday television interview, stating that no one should bring a loaded firearm with multiple magazines to a protest. That comment drew disbelief from leaders within gun rights groups. One gun rights advocate said he had attended armed protests without anyone being harmed. Conservative officials in several states echoed the view that both protesting and bearing arms are deeply rooted in American tradition. A former vice president also called for a full and transparent investigation into the officer-involved shooting. Observers across the political spectrum noted that the administration's response differed sharply from past conservative positions involving weapons at protests. Supporters of the president were found to be armed during the attack on the United States Capitol in January of 2021, and the president later issued broad pardons. In earlier years, Republicans criticized penalties imposed on homeowners who pointed guns at protesters in Missouri, and celebrated a counter-protester acquitted after fatal shootings during unrest in Wisconsin. A former Republican lawmaker noted that Preddy was lawfully carrying his firearm and never displayed it. A constitutional law professor said the fallout illustrates how divided political debate has become. He argued that years of rhetoric about the Second Amendment as protection against government tyranny were quickly abandoned when the individual involved was perceived as being from the political left. He also noted that Democrats, who have long opposed open and concealed carry laws, have been notably quiet on that issue following Preddy's death. The backlash comes as Republicans work to defend a narrow majority in the House of Representatives and contest several competitive Senate races. Some party staff and campaign aides declined to discuss the issue publicly, suggesting heightened political sensitivity. Meanwhile, a senior House Republican is sponsoring major legislation that would require states to recognize concealed carry permits issued elsewhere. The proposal cleared a key committee last year, but its future remains unclear. Gun rights advocates have achieved many legislative victories in Republican-led states over recent decades, expanding where firearms may legally be carried. A legal director for a Second Amendment advocacy group said he was surprised and disappointed by the administration's early statements. He warned that shifting positions on the issue could come at a significant political cost among core supporters. This report is based on coverage originally published by the Associated Press. My next news is, the United States administration has signaled to Ukraine that American security guarantees may depend on Kyiv agreeing to a peace deal that would likely require giving up the Donbass region to Russia. This was reported on Tuesday by a British financial newspaper, citing 8 people familiar with the discussions. According to the report, Washington has also suggested it could offer Ukraine additional weapons to strengthen its peacetime military, if Kyiv agrees to withdraw its forces from parts of eastern Ukraine that it currently controls. The news agency reporting this development said it could not independently verify the claims. A source familiar with the matter stated that the United States is not attempting to force Ukraine to make territorial concessions. The same source added that American security guarantees depend on both sides agreeing to a peace deal, but said the specific contents of such a deal are for Russia and Ukraine to determine. On Sunday, the Ukrainian president said that a United States document outlining security guarantees for Ukraine was 100% ready, and that Kyiv is now waiting for a time and place for it to be signed. The Ukrainian leader has consistently maintained that the country's territorial integrity must be preserved in any agreement to end the war. However, Ukrainian officials have expressed growing uncertainty over whether Washington will ultimately commit to security guarantees. A senior official told the financial newspaper that the United States repeatedly pauses whenever the guarantees are close to being finalized. Ukraine wants security guarantees confirmed before agreeing to give up any territory. The report said that Washington believes Ukraine must relinquish the Donbass region for the war to end, and that the United States is not pressuring the Russian president to abandon that demand. A deputy White House press secretary rejected this account, calling it completely false. She said the only role of the United States in the peace process is to bring both sides together to reach an agreement. Meanwhile, the Kremlin said on Monday that territorial issues remain central to any deal to end the fighting in Ukraine. This statement was reported by a Russian state news agency, following talks held over the weekend in Abu Dhabi. This report is based on coverage originally published by Reuters. My next news is, the United States has warned that it could send fighter jets into Canadian airspace more frequently if a major fighter jet deal between Washington and Ottawa does not go through. The warning came from the United States ambassador to Canada, who said that if the Canadian government reduces or cancels its planned purchase of advanced fighter jets, the United States would step in to fill the gaps in North American security. This could mean that the United States would buy more fighter jets for its own forces and use them to operate more often inside Canadian airspace. Under the current North American Aerospace Defense Command Agreement, both countries are already allowed to operate in each other's airspace to track or intercept threats. However, the ambassador indicated that a change in the jet deal would require a deeper restructuring of that long-standing agreement. He stated that the NORAD agreement would have to be altered if Canada changes the terms of the fighter jet purchase. These comments follow the Canadian government's decision to review the deal after determining that the program had become far more expensive than expected. In the year 2022, Canada agreed to purchase 88 advanced fighter jets from an American defense company, initially committing funding for 16 deliverable aircraft. The program quickly faced problems. Manufacturing delays slowed production, and an initial audit in the year 2025 found that the total cost had risen to $27.7 billion, up from the original estimate of $19 billion, as tensions between the United States and Canada have increased, partly due to tariff threats from the current United States president. Canada's Prime Minister ordered a formal review of the agreement. Canadian officials are now reportedly exploring alternative suppliers, including a Swedish aerospace company that produces the Gripen E fighter jet. The company has offered to manufacture the aircraft in Canada, a proposal that could create 12,600 jobs. Canada's Minister of Industry said the government is interested in major projects that not only protect national security and sovereignty, but also create jobs across the country. She added that while Canada cannot control the actions of the United States president, it can control its own defense investments, contract decisions, and job creation strategy. Despite these developments, the United States ambassador warned that if Canada chooses to purchase the Swedish fighter jets instead, Washington would still need to reconsider how it cooperates with its northern neighbor on defense and security matters. This report is based on coverage originally published by The Independent. My next news is, Guinea's new president has reappointed the country's prime minister under the newly formed government, less than 2 weeks after being sworn into office. The prime minister had already served in the same role for nearly 2 years during the period of military rule. He and his cabinet submitted their resignations last week following the president's inauguration. According to a decree read on national television on Monday evening, the prime minister has now been confirmed again under the new civilian-led government. The president was elected to a 7-year term in December, 4 years after he removed Guinea's first freely elected president from power. After seizing control, he initially promised not to run for the presidency. However, in September, voters approved a new constitution through a referendum. That constitutional change allowed members of the former military leadership to stand for public office, clearing the way for the president's candidacy. In the same decree announcing the prime minister's reappointment, the president stated that the new government will consist of 27 ministries and 2 secretaries general. The appointments for those positions are expected to be announced in the coming days. This report is based on coverage originally published by Africa News. My next news is, a Dutch court has sentenced an Eritrean man to 20 years in prison for running a large human trafficking network in which migrants were tortured and their families extorted. The ruling was delivered on Tuesday. The court said the man treated migrants without humanity while arranging their transport from Eritrea to Europe through Libya. The presiding judge stated that his sole objective was to make as much money as possible from people seeking a better future. According to the court, members of the trafficking network abused thousands of migrants. Victims were detained in overcrowded and unsanitary camps in Libya, where traffickers demanded large payments from their families. Judges heard testimony describing how victims were tortured while speaking on the phone with relatives living in the Netherlands. The abuse continued until families transferred the demanded money. Only after payments were made were the migrants placed on makeshift boats for dangerous crossings of the Mediterranean Sea. Many people drowned during those journeys. Prosecutors had requested the maximum possible sentence of 20 years, accusing the man of leading a criminal organization involved in human trafficking, extortion, hostage-taking, and sexual crimes. The court agreed, stating that the seriousness and scale of the offenses justified the full sentence. The judge noted that the defendant showed no remorse and that a psychiatric evaluation found him mentally fit to be held criminally responsible. The man has been held in Dutch custody since October of the year 2022. During the trial, there was confusion about his identity and age. He claimed to have a different name and said he was 46 years old rather than 42. He denied all charges, arguing that the case was one of mistaken identity. The court rejected that defense, stating it had no doubt that he was the individual responsible for trafficking activities in the Libyan town of Bani Walid. Defense lawyers also argued that he had already been tried in Ethiopia for similar crimes and therefore could not be prosecuted again. The judge said the Ethiopian sentence had not yet been enforced, but noted the defendant could appeal if that were to occur. Prosecutors described the man as one of the most active smugglers operating on routes linking conflict-affected regions of Africa to Europe through Libya. They said he deprived victims of their freedom and dignity, holding them in horrific conditions, starving them, torturing them, and denying them basic medical care. The Dutch investigation lasted several years and was conducted in cooperation with international partners, including the International Criminal Court and Interpol. Libya has struggled to stabilize since the uprising that overthrew the country's longtime ruler in the year 2011. Smugglers and traffickers have exploited the ongoing instability, while human rights organizations continue to accuse Libya of severe abuses against migrants. This report is based on coverage originally published by Africa News. My next news is an online survey conducted by a regional news outlet ahead of the February 11th general election in Barbados shows the governing Barbados Labour Party leading in all 30 constituencies. According to the preliminary results of the survey, 78% of respondents said they intend to vote for the ruling party. 17% indicated support for the main opposition party, while 6% said they would vote for other political groups. Early voter trends from the survey suggest a potential clean sweep for the governing party, with the opposition trailing in nearly every constituency. The results indicate that the ruling party could retain all parliamentary seats and return to power for a third consecutive term. The closest race appears to be in the constituency of St. John. The opposition leader is facing a tight contest against the governing party's candidate. Survey results show 38 respondents favoring the ruling party candidate and 26 supporting the opposition, out of a total of 71 participants. In contrast, the Prime Minister is projected to win decisively in the constituency of St. Michael North East, where 48 out of 53 respondents expressed support for the governing party. The survey also shows large margins for the ruling party in several other constituencies, including St. Michael Central, the city of Bridgetown, St. Michael West, Christchurch South, St. George North, and St. Lucie. In St. Michael Central, 112 out of 128 respondents supported the ruling party, compared with 13 for the opposition. Strong performances were also recorded in St. Peter, St. Philip North, St. Thomas, and St. Joseph, where the governing party maintained comfortable leads. Across Christchurch, the ruling party led in all subdivisions, including East, East Central, Southwest, and West Central. Christchurch South recorded one of the highest participation levels, with 97 out of 130 respondents favoring the governing party. The survey data shows participation across all age groups, with the highest engagement among voters aged 55 and older. This group accounted for 600 participants, representing 31% of the total sample of 1,957 respondents. Voters aged 18 to 24 made up 19% of respondents. Those aged 35 to 44 and 45 to 54 each represented 18%. Participants aged 25 to 34 accounted for 16% of the total. The general election in Barbados is scheduled for February 11, 2026, 1 year earlier than originally planned after the Prime Minister announced snap elections. 5 political parties are contesting the vote, including the ruling party, the main opposition, and 3 smaller political groups. While the online survey is not a scientific poll and reflects voluntary participation, the consistency of results across all 30 constituencies offers a snapshot of current voter sentiment. The data suggests strong public confidence in the governing party as Barbados moves toward nomination day and election day. This report is based on coverage originally published by a Caribbean news outlet. My next news. A 26-year-old contestant has been crowned Miss Global Jamaica for the year 2026, following a closely contested national pageant held in Kingston. The title was awarded early Sunday morning at the Douglas Orain Auditorium, located at Womer's Boys School. The new title holder received the crown from the outgoing Jamaican representative, who held the title the previous year. Finishing close behind were the first runner-up and the second runner-up, both of whom delivered strong performances throughout the competition and posed a serious challenge on pageant night. The crowning moment took place on stage with both the incoming and outgoing queens present. A special guest also joined the ceremony, the reigning Miss Global title holder from Vietnam. At last year's international competition in Thailand, the Jamaican representative placed as first runner-up alongside the Vietnamese winner. According to the organizers and judges, the competition was intensely contested. The winner emerged at the top after competing against more than 25 other contestants in the Miss Global Jamaica pageant. The event was praised for its high standard, strong performances, and competitive spirit, marking a significant moment in Jamaica's national pageantry calendar. This report is based on coverage originally published by a Caribbean regional news outlet. My next news is in the next video. I am Remi Jurmain Djalis with my news today.